Let's open up to Exodus chapter 3. We'll see the definition of God as God gives him of himself. The series of lessons that we're doing right now is about the character and nature of God. It's impossible to kind of describe who he is. And that's what's amazing about this statement in Exodus chapter 3, when Moses meets with God at the burning bush. He stands before him, and God tells Moses, you're going to go to the Israelites, and you're going to deliver them. And Moses says to God, well, whom shall I say will send me? And we get into Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. And verse 13 is what I just said. What is his name? They shall say, the God of your fathers hath sent me unto you. And they shall say to me, what is his name? What shall I say unto them? And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. So that's a pretty phenomenal name of who God is. And you could look at this actually in some, I'm not sure which Bible translations, but this statement right here, I am that I am, like that is the only way to describe who God is. Other versions will say, I was that I was, or I am that I was. This phrase, I am that I am, I mean, this is talking about the eternity of God, the all-powerful ability of God, his knowing everything, is everywhere. And who is God? Well, he is that he is. I am that I am. And there's a lot of things you can trace that through. Just looking at who he is at this moment, he's a fire in a bush, and yet the bush wasn't burned. Why? Because God is that he is. I am that I am. The bush doesn't burn up because it's some ways like you think about it like energy and power. Like I wake up in the morning, rested or tired, and I have to eat and drink throughout the day. Why? Because I need energy. Because I need energy. My body has to convert the food and the water and into energy, and then it needs to rest at nighttime to refresh. And then after a certain period of time in my life, my body starts dying. And doesn't matter how healthy I eat or how many exercises I do or how not stressed I am, my body's always in a state of change until the day that you're going to bury it down into a grave. And then even then, that whole body is going to disappear into dust and ashes. And so no mankind could say anything like what God says. God says, I am that I am. He doesn't have any of those needs. There is no need for him to rest. There's no food he has to eat to reboot his energy. He can have as much outgo as he wants, and he never drains his energy. I mean, that's kind of the idea of what we're looking at. It's never God that changes. I hope that's an adequate enough introduction to this. With that in mind, knowing that he is that he is. I am that I am. Well, who are you? Well, I am the resurrection and the life. Well, who are you? I am the door. Who are you? I am the way, the truth, and the life. And again, comparing it to a man, no man, because people say about Jesus Christ that, well, he was just a man. Well, no man could say those things about I am somebody and have it be eternal. There's nothing that I am that I was 10 years ago, except that I'm a man, but I change. There's nothing about me. My opinions, they change every week, month, year, 10 years. I mean, I generally speaking, yeah, what I believe is what I believed when I was 16, 17, 18, but only because I believed the Bible, which was written by the eternal God. And that's it. But opinions on things, harshness of how I come across things, or stances that I take, they change. They change all the time. But not with God. Why? Because I am that I am. He's a never-changing being. With that kind of it as a foundation, we're going to look at the big major characteristics of who God is. That starts off with those words that we talked about: omnipresence, omniscience, omnipowerful, that doesn't sound right. Omnipotent, potency, omnipotent. And omni just means all. So omnipresence. Let's look at two verses today. We'll look at Jeremiah chapter 23. I am that I am. God, who are you? Well, I am. You are what? I am. I am strength. I am holiness. I am love. I am power. I am might. I am your protection. I mean, you could go through the whole Bible and pick all of these things out, and people have done this, and it's amazing to see. They've made posters about it, all the I ams, who God is, and go right on down to it. There's really just no end to it. People can go through the alphabet, pick every letter of the alphabet, go from A to Z, and they pick all, I am Alpha and Omega. I am the beloved. I am your champion. I am the destroyer of death. I am, and you can just go right on down. Why? Because we're talking about God, not a man. So Jeremiah 23, and we're talking about the God, not a fake God, not an occultic God. You want love, you got to go to the God of love. You got to brew the brew, and you got to do it at the right time. I mean, you're dealing with funny things when we're talking about the God of eternity. You want to compare it to that. Jeremiah 23, verse 23. So we're talking about, first thing I want to talk about is his omnipresence. Omnipresence, meaning that he is everywhere. Omni, all presence, places, all places. Omnipresence. Jeremiah 23, verse 23 and 24. Am I a God at hand, saith the Lord, not a God afar off? Can any hide himself in secret places that I shall not see him, saith the Lord? Do not I fill heaven and earth, saith the Lord. So there's small differences with him saying, I fill heaven and earth. This is not like the occultists that teach that God is a tree, or a tree is God, or a rock is God. Okay, there's a difference between what the Bible teaches, that God's there, but the rock or the tree, this is not God. And so that's kind of what animists teach. It's a small group of people, but some people believe that. That's not what God's saying. God's saying he's everywhere. That doesn't mean that the idol is God. No, God's just everywhere. So we'll turn over to Psalm 139. I think we looked at this before. Psalm 139 also teaches this. God is present, omnipresent. He is present in his creation, but he's not limited to it, because he's outside of his creation too. He's in heaven. Psalm 139, and we'll just look at two verses here, verses 7 and 8. Now here's an interesting thought, because there's this preacher, and he was probably the last well-known preacher of the world evangelist, Billy Graham. He got to a point that he taught that all that hell is separation from God. So they say if you go to hell, you don't want to go to hell because hell is separation from God. That's what he taught. That's what and he changed, because I'm saying we're a man. We change. God's the one who doesn't, but we do. And he changed his belief and his position on kind of that major doctrine. He kind of watered it down a bit. The idea, if I die, I don't want to die without salvation, because then I'll be eternally without God or apart from God. Well, that's an interesting thought, but I wonder if the Bible supports that thought, because the idea is if I go to hell, I'll be there without God. There'll be no God there. Well, okay, Psalm 139, verses 7 and 8. Whither shall I go from thy spirit? Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. You skip on down to verse 11. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, the night shall be light for me. Verse 12, yea, the darkness hideth not from thee, but the night shineth as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike. Is going to hell separation from God? Well, not according to this verse. No. And that's kind of a misunderstanding of what hell is. Hell is the embodiment of God's wrath and his anger, his justness, his holiness, which is why it burns forever, because it's God. So his omnipresence. So he's in heaven, he's in hell, and he's around us. Now, there's two things that, knowing that he's omnipresent, there's two things that it should do for you. It should comfort you, number one. Knowing that no matter where we are, when we are, what the struggle is, that there's God with us at all times. There's no need to wait to go to church in order to talk to God, to get his help. There's no need to wait to go talk to a priest or get before an icon to talk to God. Because he's omnipresent. He's right there at all times in your room with you. This doesn't mean you can skip out on church. That's what people say. They get a hold of this and they say, oh, I can meet God out in the woods. I can have a better time of fellowshipping with God, fish on the fishing boat than I can in church. And I think my favorite time was when a school superintendent told me that. And I said, man, if that's true, is that what you do with your kids too? Is you just let them skip out on school because they can do their math better at home? I don't think so. People give God second rate. They may give him a second place above everything else. Put everything else in front of God. So number one, it should be comforting. And the second thing it should do is it should subdue you. Subdue you or warn you, knowing that he's with you. So the fear in your heart should be there for anytime I want to sin. Nope, God's right here. You wouldn't do that if there's a crowd around you. Well, there is. It's called God. You wouldn't do that if somebody's watching you. Well, there is. He's God. You don't play hide and seek with God. No, he sees you everywhere you go. Lesson 20, where is God? God is everywhere. And we'll move on down to lesson 21. Can you see God? And the answer is no, you can't see God, but he sees me. We'll look at John chapter 1 for this and Proverbs chapter 15. So John chapter 1 and Proverbs 15. This goes along with his omnipresence. He's everywhere. But he's not a God that you see. You don't see his presence, which of course is why the atheists don't like God, because I can't touch him, taste him, experiment with him, handle him. God's long-suffering, long-patience. There are times where you could have seen him and seen his hand at work, and as we see history, it doesn't matter because God showed all of those miracles to the Jews in Egypt, and they still give them enough time and a little hunger in their tummies and a little separation, a little heat, a little sweat on the brow, and all of a sudden, no, we don't believe in them anymore. Example of Lazarus in the New Testament, where he died and Jesus Christ went over to him, resurrected him, and then what did they do to him? The Jews, the Pharisees said, there's too many people believing in Jesus Christ because of Lazarus. We need to kill him because there's too many people listening to his testimony. We need to kill him. Just laugh at that every time I read it. He just resurrected him from the dead. And they said his testimony's too strong. We need to kill him. And the nature of man is to walk away, to reject God. That's our nature. That's our fallen nature. That's not our God-given nature. That's the fight. The God-given nature is knowing. People know that there's a God and they want to seek him out. But the fallen nature, from Adam and with the attack of the devil, the control that he has on the world system is such that anything God-related is ridiculed, mocked, made fun of. So can you see God? No, but he always sees us. I'm going to read Proverbs 15, verse 3. It says, the eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. I think that's a verse you learn as a kid. You just know that verse. That's a good verse. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. And then in John chapter 1, we read verse 18. It says, no man hath seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he hath declared him. So there's a bit of a Trinity at work here. I mean, this is one of the places that people that deny the Trinity, this is one of the verses that they'll stand on. This isn't a denial of the Trinity. This is just kind of an affirmation of the distinction in it. The holiness of God, God the Father, he's one that no man will ever see, ever can see. You say, I don't understand that. Well, we're going to get to it in a bit, but like the Trinity of man is you have three parts. You have a body, you have a soul, you have a spirit. And that's how God is. He has a body, he has a soul, he has a spirit. And the body you can see and feel. The spirit you can feel but not see. And the soul you can not see and not feel. And that's what we're dealing with God. if with mankind, if you were to separate those three individually from each other, we would die. We need all three to live, but God being God, he can separate all three of them, and they all have their own distinct personalities. Because I don't understand that. Think about it for the sun. We've talked about the examples of God, the Trinity, in nature. And the sun gives three rays, alpha, beta, and gamma rays. Now, this is off my memory, so I don't know which one's which. But one of those rays you can see and you can feel. One of those rays you can't see, but you can feel. And one of those rays you can't see it and you can't feel it. That's a picture. Now, you say, I can't understand it. Pray to God and ask God to help you see it, because that's the only way you get it. As you open the Bible up, you read it, and you pray God, and you say, God, I want to be able to understand it. Which, by the way, he's God. So there's always going to be a limited understanding you're going to have of him. But this verse here, John 1:18, this is a verse that JWs change in their Bibles, because this teaches, like I say, it's teaching a unity of God. It says, no man hath seen God at any time. Their Bible actually says the only begotten God, which is in the bosom of the Father. He hath declared him. They change that. They make it say the only begotten God, which is in the bosom of the Father. That's awful. That's awful. What a perversion. They make God, Jesus Christ, be a created God. There's so many doctrinal problems with that, and it's just a perversion. There's no reason for it. The Bible is a well-supported book, historically. Like, it's more supported than literally anything else. Like Homer's Iliad, that scholars love, that was written a long time ago, before Jesus Christ, so over 2,000 years ago. And how do we know it existed? Because we have written documents of it, but there's only like a couple dozen written documents, and the earliest one that we have, as we date it, is written hundreds of years, I think even close to 500 to 1,000 years. This is all memory. I'm sorry, I don't have this prepared in front of me. It's written a long time after Homer's Iliad was written, and yet we believe in the Iliad, and we accept the Iliad, and they teach it, and they study it. The Bible is very different than anything else. And we have the Bible that we have documents, historical documents. We have almost 6,000 documents that attest to the Bible being what it was. They agree with each other. Like 95% of what's written down of these documents, of these 6,000 different documents, agree with each other. And they weren't written 500 to 1,000 years after. I mean, some were, yeah. But we have people that wrote things during the time of Jesus Christ. And some of our documents are from the time of Jesus Christ. So when we're dealing with the Bible, with this word, the only begotten Son versus the only begotten God, it's like there's a reason why we have Son written in our Bibles, is because we have documents that back it up. And there's like 0 documents that say the only begotten God. And so they just changed it because that's what their theology teaches. You're going to get yourself into a mess when you change the Bible, because that's what your theology teaches. So the only begotten, no man hath seen God at any time. So can you see God? No. No man hath seen God at any time. So this is specifically talking about God the Father, who's in heaven. No man's seen him. No man's ever going to see him. But the only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he hath declared him. So Jesus Christ declared God the Father, and Jesus Christ is called the image of God. And so the only part of God that you're going to see is Jesus Christ. So is God anywhere? Yes, God's everywhere. Can you see him? No, you can't see him. You can feel him, the Spirit. You can feel the Spirit. And you can see that in John chapter 3, where it talks about the Spirit is like a wind. A wind is something that you can feel, but you can't see. And of course, a physical body, you can feel it and touch it, and that's who we are. God has the Spirit, and God has the Son, and God has the Father. So the story of this is in Moses went to the mount, and was going to appear before God, and we just talked to him about it in Exodus chapter 3, and we have the burning bush, and God's presenting himself towards to Moses. What did Moses see when he saw God at the burning bush? He saw fire. Yeah, he saw fire. And that's what God wraps himself in, as he wraps himself in darkness and in light and in a cloud and in fire. And the Bible says that burning bush, that was an angel of the Lord, actually, making it Jesus Christ. He talked with the angel at the bush. So there's a lot of overlap with the Trinity. This God that we can't see, he reveals himself towards us. One way that he reveals himself towards us is he reveals himself in the universe. And we know that by Psalm chapter 19. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. God is revealed in creation. Even though you can't see him, he still chose to reveal himself to us. And one way he did it was he revealed himself in the physical universe. And historically, every nation, every tribe, every tongue out there has, without any written word or without any revelation, they've all chosen to believe that there is a God, a higher power, every one of them. The only ones that don't are when men get together ridiculing the idea of God, and they write textbooks saying how it's stupid to believe in God, and then they teach in the public schools. And even that whole idea in America started because back, when was this? This was back in the late 1800s or early 1900s. The early 1900s, a group came to the government and said, once the public school became a thing, because it wasn't always a thing, but the group came to the schools and they said, to the government that controlled the school, that governed the schools, and they said, we don't think it's right that only one theory of the start of humanity is being taught in schools. Well, guess which theory was being taught? Creation was being taught in the public schools. And the atheists came to the government and said, we don't feel that it's right that the children don't have a choice to choose what they should believe, what they want to believe. And with that argument, they pushed through their teaching of atheism into the public schools. And of course now, you are not allowed to teach in a divine creation. There's that movie several years back called Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed. The idea was that he interviewed teachers that believed in a divine creator, an intelligence. That's what you see when you look at the world. You see an intelligence behind it. You see too much. And you say, well, only dumb people do. I don't know. No, you're ignorant. If you say that, you're ignorant. Because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people with PhDs after their names that have put the time and effort into studying, that they stand on the foundation, on the platform of there being an intelligent designer. That's what you see when you look at creation. You see an intelligent designer, if you're being honest. Now, if you just hate God, of course you're not going to. And that's what the atheists do. They just hate God. And if you ever hear people say, well, the science doesn't teach God, that's such a silly thing to say, because there is no such thing as the science. If you get a group of 100 scientists together and they're going to try to teach on sight or sound or light or darkness or height or depth or gravity or anything, they will not agree on anything. You get 100 scientists together, they will each have their own differing opinions on what they believe the evidence shows. There is no such thing as scientific consensus. And a scientist will tell you that. There is no the science. Getting all that with this, there's a huge amount of people that believe in an intelligent designer that are full-blown scientists. And that's how God has revealed himself in nature, so that mankind can just study nature and discover that there is a God. Now, that's limited. And we're going to get to that. The next way that God revealed himself to mankind is he revealed himself through the human soul. And we go back to Genesis chapter 3 for that one, and chapter 2, for that one, where God created man in his own image. And the image of God is we have a remnant of that. Now, I say a remnant because when man sinned, he died. And the image of God is not dead, it's alive. We lost, I don't know if you want to say the whole thing or part of it, I don't know. But we lost that image of God. Man died out of it, and he sinned and became separated from God. It's part of it still. We still retain at least some remnants of that image, and there's something, we have this thing called a conscience, and the science doesn't really explain what a conscience is. That's one of the big arguments that you can use against what this atheist tries to claim is, well, we believe that murder's wrong. Well, why do you believe murder's wrong? We believe that adultery's wrong. Well, why do you believe adultery's wrong? I think still to this day that most people claim that if you have formed a relationship with somebody and you cheat on them, that's wrong. Well, why? What makes a right and a wrong? Well, there you go. That's our argument. Everyone hates Hitler. Well, if he won the war, no one would hate Hitler. They would have praised him as being the smartest, best, the savior of the world. And man, he exterminated those Jews, and he exterminated those peasants, and he would have been the best of the best. But no, now he's the devil. Nobody likes him. Okay, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying he's a good man. No, I'm just using him as an example. Our human soul that God gave us, that's the only explanation. And you say, well, not everyone believes. I know. But now we live in a world that you've been educated and trained apart from listening to your conscience. And now you want to get to a place where you have no foundation at home, you have no mama and you have no daddy, and you get taught these truths that are contradictory to nature itself. And guess what happens to the group of people that deny that you're made in the image of God, deny that you have an identity in Jesus Christ? Boy is a boy and a girl is a girl. Guess what happens? Your conscience dies, and suicide rates are through the roof from particularly young women that are being the target of many of these things. Suicide, it's the number one killer for young people. Why? Because of the human soul has been rejected and has been denied, and the truths have been taken away from who you are. So the Bible has this phrase called having their conscience seared with a hot iron. And that's what mankind has done. They've seared their conscience with a hot iron. 1 Timothy 4:2, talking about the end days. So the human soul, the ability to think, feel, choose. Man was created originally as a moral being in complete righteousness. And we still are moral, but they're apart from the righteousness of God. God reveals himself in the physical universe. He's revealed himself through the human soul. Both of those things have limitations, because nature will teach us that there's a God. The human soul will teach us that there's right and wrong. But those things have limitations because they don't get into the actual details. Well, what does get into the actual details? The written word. The written word supersedes the revealed nature and the human soul. And I say that because everything that you do should be based upon the written word. God's written us a direction book, an instruction book. Some people have called it a love letter. God's written us a how-to manual, and he's written us a history book. All of those things all in one about the Bible. And he's given us directions on how to live right, why our nature doesn't like lying, why our nature doesn't like killing and stealing, because that's all descendant down from God's very nature, the written word. So that's Hebrews chapter 4. Hebrews chapter 4, we're going to read verse 12 and 13. Hebrews chapter 4, verses 12 and 13. It says, the word of God is quick. Again, quick means alive. Quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of soul and spirit and of the joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. Neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight, the Bible's sight. The Bible, according to this, knows your thoughts. But all things are naked and open under the eyes of him with whom we have to do. So God and the written word are connected. The written word is alive because God put it alive, made it alive. The words of God are an extension of who God is. And that written word is what has revealed himself to us. And an example of this is Luke chapter 15, when we have this history account of the rich man and Lazarus both going to eternity, and one went to Abraham's bosom, one went to hell. The rich man begs to Abraham and says, I have 5 brethren yet still alive. He says, send Lazarus, resurrect him. It says, if somebody goes to Lazarus from the dead, they will believe him. Abraham answered back and said, what? Remember what he said? God said, they have the written word. Moses and the prophets. They have the written word. That's what you need, the written word. That supersedes what you learn from God in nature, and it's going to agree with it. And the human soul, it's going to agree with your conscience unless you've changed your conscience. You can read the Bible if your conscience hasn't been seared. Your conscience will agree with the Bible. It'll read with the Bible and be like, yeah, that's it right there. And it'll touch your heart and your very being of your soul. So that's the third way that God's revealed himself. I think those two things would be together. A hard heart and a seared conscience would be results of being exposed to the truth and rejecting it. And then the way to unsear your conscience and unhard your heart would be to submit and humble yourself to the truth as it's been submitted to you. You have to go back to those areas that you rejected God in and submit yourself to it. And that's how you would unsear your conscience and unhard your heart. And of course, the fourth way God reveals himself is through Jesus Christ himself. Jesus Christ is the living word, not the written word, the living word. Yeah, so I think that's about our time for today. So 2 lessons there, lesson 20, lesson 21. Again, lesson 20 is where is God? God is everywhere. And lesson 21 is can you see God? No, but he always sees me.